case folks may not know, tell them what a cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency AI adoption specialist is.
So an AI adoption specialist is just essentially one that helps, the workforce understand how we can incorporate artificial intelligence into your everyday process.
And how long have you had that position?
I was in this position for 6 months, officially in this position because again, AI inside the federal government was new, right? It was newly
Right.
established within the federal government, and because there was a big push, right, to get AI talent into the federal government. Again, being able to do this on the contracting side was a little easier, but it was being able to do this on behalf of the American people that drew me into this particular position.
Now, were you a contractor or were you in that probationary period they keep talking about?
So I was one that was my position was subject to a probationary period because it was
Okay.
a newly established role within the federal government. I had been in the federal government for 18 months in total, but prior to that, I had served 6 years in the United States Army. So I had
Wow.
federal service time still attributing, right? I had days attributing towards my federal government time and actually paying back into that system to essentially what they
Wow.
call buy back your time. And so in total, I had almost 8 years in federal service time. But because in my role as in AI being newly established, I was, subject to that probationary period.
Wow. So you served your country in the army and now you're serving your country again in the federal government. So I want to go through this a little bit. When you hear during the campaign
Mhm.
with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, did you hear about his plan? Well, project of 2025 to fire thousands and thousands of federal workers. Did you hear that at all?
I did not, not in
You did
terms,
not hear that.
not in
Wow.
not in this way, right? I knew that there was going to be some downsizing. I know they had mentioned downsizing the federal government, and again, you have every right to do that in the executive branch, but there are laws in place to protect from the way in which this has been done.
Mm.
I think that done efficiently and done effectively, done morally and done lawfully, this we wouldn't be in such a reactionary posture. And so,
Mm.
yes, while I know that they wanted to re-identify, right, I do remember them trying to re-identify federal government workers to making them more politically appointed positions. Again, but there's still a process that goes with that. That's this isn't the effective way. This isn't the right way to go about doing that. And we've seen that, right? And so that's what we've been seeing playing out in the media, right? We've seen it playing out in different courtrooms and now up to the Supreme Court, is that things were done illegally.
So you didn't hear about they were going to fire from 55,000 to up to 2 million, especially people who they felt like had political affiliations. I mean, this guy went on MSNBC and talked about it. You didn't hear about that.
Not in that way. I knew
Not
that
in
they were
that way,
talking about downsizing,
but not in
uh,
that way.
but
Yeah.
but not, yeah, not in
So,
giving those
Jonathan, I
specifics.
want to ask you. I want to ask you. So, um, what could I have done to reach someone like you to make sure that you heard that, or someone other federal workers? Because I felt like so many folks in media they were yelling from the rooftops, but the message wasn't getting out there, or maybe Democrats failed to get that to everybody. Everybody should have heard about this, but maybe I'm in my political bubble. But what way could that message have gotten to you and your colleagues?
I think, well, for me personally, I'm a registered independent. So, a lot of the media in which I receive doesn't come from one side or the other. And a lot of it can kind of get watered down. So I think the
Mm,
delivery of the message, again, unless it severely impacted them, I was more so concerned about things like Department of Education, right? I was more so
right.
concerned about like the impacts that it was going to have on HBCUs because I'm a product of two HBCUs, right? Receiving my undergraduate at North Carolina A&T and then my master's at Bowie State. So those were the things that were more so
Bowie,
impacting
shout out,
me.
shout out,
Yeah. So
shout out to Bowie. Yeah.
those
So
were
you
the
were
things
worried
that
about
were
that, yeah,
impacting me. And
yeah.
so being able to receive, again, even as a federal employee, the message essentially reaching me again, I didn't feel like I fell under those categories because I had
Mm,
veterans preference, right? So I had
mm,
all of these protections and I'd already been in the federal government. So I knew that they were going to have a freeze because that typically happens anyway, as far as like bringing on any new personnel actions.
yeah.
So all of that. And so there was so much information. And again, I know they say that every election is the most pivotal election, known to man at that time. And it's very
Mm.
true, but there's so much information that's being shared
Flood the zone.
that
Yeah,
there's
they flood the zone.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so they flood you, right? And so it's like, well, what's going to most impact you and your household?
Do you mind saying who you voted for? You don't have to if you don't want to. Do you
I
mind
write
saying
my
who you
name
voted?
in.
You wrote your name in
I wrote my
for the
name in
presidential election.
for the president,
You
knowing I could never serve as president because I was born in Panama. But I knew that
oh
I could do a better job with leading the American people because, again, it goes back to a man that has compassion understands his power, but a man that's only known power doesn't have compassion. And so,
right.
for me, it was my approach to being something different because my purpose has never been defined in any position. And so
Gotcha.
if the Lord saw fit for me to be the president, then he would make sure that that happened. So that's
So
why I
you didn't
write
vote for
my name in.
Kamala Harris. So
No.
Kamala Harris didn't move you her plans for the middle class or anything like that around it didn't resonate
No,
with you.
it didn't necessarily impact me one way or the other. Simply because again, I understand the three levels of government. So,
Hmm.
what matters to me is the local election, right? Making sure that I participate in my local elections and I make sure that I participate in those that are running for Senate and for Congress. And so we were able to vote in Senator Also Brooks out of PG County because
Right,
the
right.
things in which she was going to help the people of PG County do, I think she would then have a voice and was able to be a representation of the people in PG County. And so
But
I,
let me just
I'm,
ask you though, and if I'm getting too personal, we can
no, no,
change
you're
it. But
fine.
I hear what you're saying though, because I guess you're in a blue state, you're in Maryland, so you felt like it didn't matter. But I guess my larger question, because I don't work in D.C. I'm not a D.C. guy. I've never had a job in D.C. or anything like that. Um, but you are the kind of voter that Kamala Harris really was trying to appeal to and was trying to get. So regardless if it was going to impact, your state or not, I mean, did you vote for Obama or Hillary Clinton? Have you ever voted for a president before
I
in your
have.
lifetime?
I
You
have.
have. Okay. So why didn't you? What was it about her, regardless of you being in a blue state? Because in red states, they knew Trump was going to win. In West Virginia, they voted for Trump. You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
I was
Absolutely.
curious to know what was it about her that made you say, "No, I'm not going to vote for this president."
I think it's the platform. And so when we have this type of conversation, um, I want to be reminded of the way in which the presentation was made to the American people, right? When the previous administration was in place and President Joe Biden, right? The Democratic Party had an opportunity to bring forth alternative options, right? But they were told pretty much essentially to stand down. That we were going to present Joe Biden as our representation of the Democratic Party. We knew that on the Republican side, yes, they had their campaigns, and Trump came out victorious out of the Republican Party, but we weren't given those options on the Democratic side of the House. It was essentially Joe Biden and everyone else stand down. And then
Well,
when
because he was the incumbent. They always
right, he
do
was the
that. The
incumbent, right?
incumbent always has that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they typically have that, right? But they
Yeah.
also knew, I believe they also knew that as we come to find out down the line, he wasn't going to be able to make his way through the campaign season. And so we were given, an option in Kamala Harris, but she didn't have the same opportunity to build her platform, right? To build what she was going to run on outside of, we had some sound bites, right? And I think some of the things that turned away, a lot of people that are, I would say, conservative Democrats or,
Hmm.
reserved independents, were too far left. If that, I guess, if that makes
Like
any sense.
what? Like what? Just curious. Like what?
I mean, man, if I could pick one thing, I think it was the commercials that were shown talking about the tax dollars going for transitioning um,
The
uh,
trans issue.
Yeah, the transition, right?
But that was Trump's commercials.
Correct, correct.
So
Painting
so it was
light.
Trump's commercials against her around trans folks. But did you know that was a lie? That it was under Trump's administration that gave trans people access to surgeries when they were in prison. That was
Wow.
his administration. You didn't know that.
No.
They told a lie. What did Kamala Harris is for they them, Trump is for you. But the New York Times the next day released an article saying they showed the memo
Hmm.
under Trump's administration that allowed access for trans folks to have surgeries while in prison. But you see how slick it is, man?
Absolutely.
They did this shit back in the day with the welfare queen narrative, with
Yep.
the Willie Horton ad, and now they're using trans people. And
Yep.
I mean, do you know any trans people? Do you know any
Oh
trans
yeah.
people?
Absolutely.
Well, it's just like, are they the ones that are going to fire you from your federal job? Are they the ones that are going to end the Department of Education? So it saddens me to hear. I'm glad we're having this dialogue. It's all love because I want to know why someone like you, even if though you're in blue state, why she didn't resonate, and it was an ad that was a lie that that impacted you. At least one part of it. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So, again, I look back at the definition of politics, right? And that's winning over the hearts and minds. And it's also playing on the ignorance, right? Because a lot of people don't go back and do their research to understand that it was indeed the policy of the former administration. Um, but again, it wouldn't influence me, but I'm just speaking about on a massive scale of people, right? They're playing on that ignorance because a lot of people are not going to go back and do that research to know that that indeed was a lie and that it was being manipulated and painting her in a bad light. But again, the larger issue here is what do we do now going forward, right? Because
Yeah,
AI is going to be able to take over
it
things and
is.
make things that are untrue seem as if they are true.
But let me ask you, Jonathan, do you think if Kamala Harris was president, do you think you would have lost your job?
Um, I don't. I don't think
Yeah.
that even with Trump being president, that I should have lost my job. But
No, 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 no. But you did when Trump was president. But do you
right,
think if Kamala Harris was president, do you think you would have been fired? Do you think all these federal workers would have been fired under a Kamala Harris administration?
no,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying. Like she wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have fired 300 FAA workers. You know what I mean? It breaks my heart. So, um, when Trump wins in November, and he didn't win Maryland, but when he wins in November, when did you begin to have concerns? Was it not until January? Did you still think that everything would be okay? At what point did you feel like, oh, wait a minute, they're coming after these jobs? At what point did that happen?
I honestly, again, it all came as a shock to me. I
It all
didn't.
came as a shock.
Yeah, it all came as a shock to me. Again, I was informed of my pending termination over the weekend. So
Wow.
I had no idea. And same with my reinstatement, right? I was reinstated over the weekend. So I received a similar email just stating, you'd be reinstated, as if this didn't happen and you're going to be placed on administrative leave. So my concerns, again, a lot of this happened for a lot of people out of nowhere. So I don't think there was a time to prepare. Like, yes, there were clues, there were indications, but I don't think anybody could have prepared for the mass in which all of this has happened. At no point in time, as a federal employee that took an oath to serve the American people, that I think that I would be symbolically represented by a chainsaw. Right? Does that make sense? At no point in
It
time
makes
that I ever see as a veteran, I'd be symbolized as a scalpel. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
those are just inhumane ways
But
in which
but you
we're
know what,
handling.
brother? It does make sense, and I hear you. And again, this is what I cover every day. But they said they were going to do this shit. They wrote it in Project 2025,
Mhm.
and I don't mean to be dystopian. It's about to get worse.
Oh yeah.
They ain't playing.
Oh
They
yeah.
ain't playing. They said it. They said we are going to gut the federal government. We are going to have loyalists in the federal government. We're going to gut it, and we're going to be dramatic about it. And we want to give all power to the executive branch, and we're going to decimate Congress. They said this. They said it to our face. At one point, Trump said, "You don't have to vote again. Just vote this time. You don't have to vote again." I just want to go back to this. You're a HBCU grad, right? You're a
Correct.
HBCU grad. You're a black man, right? Obviously, you're a black dude, but you have roots in Panama, right?
Mhm.
Um, I'm just curious. Kamala Harris is a HBCU grad.
Correct. Howard
I know
University.
it's not just about being an HBCU grad.
Mhm.
Kamala Harris has diverse roots as well. Um, and she has a really good record. She has a really good history, especially for her work in California.
Mhm.
When she was senator of California, I mean, she was fighting for a higher minimum wage. She had an opportunity agenda for black men. And I'm assuming when you saw Donald Trump saying that Kamala Harris just turned black, I'm assuming as a black man that I don't know if that pissed me off to hear this old white dude try to be the gatekeeper of blackness. But I
Mhm.
do think identity politics matter. And
Mhm.
for Trump, his identity politics, 8 out of 10 of his voters are white, and they resonate with his rich whiteness. 8 out of 10, a small number of black men voted for him, but nothing substantial. So I'm just curious why Obama really resonated with black people and he was talented and brilliant and the whole bit. Why didn't Kamala Harris resonate with you as a black woman, an HBCU grad, and someone who has a pretty good record? I'm just curious because people say they vote how they feel.
Mhm.
And why didn't you feel her?
It's not that I didn't. So I want to make sure that's clear. I had no intentions on voting for the previous administration and Trump. I had no intentions on doing that.
Right.
But it was also ensuring that my voice was heard in the fact in which I felt the way in which she was presented.
The way
To
she was presented.
Right. As far as, being like, hey, the only option as the incumbent is going to be Joe Biden. But we also saw.
Would you have voted for Joe Biden if he would have stayed in and pulled? I thought they kind of did Joe Biden wrong, pushing him out. But if he
Right.
would have stayed in and
Absolutely.
just, you would have voted for Joe Biden. Wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because
Wow.
again, the democratic process was followed, right? And I think that
Hmm.
that's what personally turned me away was the democratic process was circumvented in ways, right?
They pushed him out. They
And
did.
so
They
when they
did.
pushed him out, they should have then opened the door for others to essentially campaign on what their agenda was going to be.
And
And
it was a
and
3 week story every day. Every
yep.
George Clooney chit
Yep.
chatting, Rob Reiner, they threw his ass
I mean
out.
that's what it was for me. And so I don't know what that means for everyone else. Again, I can only speak for myself, and I'm not one to sow any type of divisiveness. That's just not what I've
Yeah.
done as a veteran, and then as a public civil servant, is to try to be more unified in my messaging.
But I
Uh,
do want to ask you this. I'm just curious to know, did a part of you have any hesitation voting for a woman?
no,
Not at
absolutely not.
all. Did you vote for Hillary Clinton?
Absolutely.
You did. Okay. I was just curious. I was just curious because
Yeah,
I've
I
heard
did.
that was a thing too. Just wanted to know.
Yeah, no, no,
So
no. So for me, I understand that argument, because
yeah,
again, as a veteran, I know in which the way other countries look at and look at women,
yeah,
they don't look at them as equal. But so we have that understanding, but I think you only get that understanding from certain exposures. But
yeah.
for me personally, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a woman serving in leadership positions. I mean, you even look
Mm,
at that again as a man of faith. I've looked at them trying to categorize women as not being ordained to fit or to fit in the
right.
pulpit. There's
Yeah.
absolutely no scripture that states that they are inferior to. So no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with voting a woman in any leadership position.
So, what do you want to see moving forward? Like you said, we have to move forward, and federal workers are still under attack. Some have not been reinstated.
Correct.
So, what would you like to see moving forward?
Just our continued voices. I would like to see us continue to speak up. My mentor, one of my greatest mentors was the late Congressman John Lewis. And so he had a
Yes.
coin about good trouble, right? When you see
Yes.
something, say something, find a way to get in the way, create trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble to help redeem the soul of America, right? And so that's what I hope to see happen. We've lost the days of the Elijah Cummings representing us in Congress. We've lost the days of the John Lewis and that voice of reason within the Senate and within the House, right? So that's what I would like to see happen. I would like to see more representation of people that look like you and I represented within the state house, right? Being able to
Yeah.
come to the table and have a seat at the table, have a voice at the table, influence the decisions that are happening at the table. We need to create more bridges instead of islands, and I think that's what's currently happening. Is we're trying to establish too many islands, but where we're isolated away, and we're trying to remove ourselves where it's time to be more of a bridge and build towards being more unified in our voice and being more compassionate with our people.
Yeah. And brother, I just feel like that's what Kamala Harris was trying to do. She didn't go low. She didn't insult
You didn't.
Donald Trump. She dragged him on policy during the debate. She went to work. But, they were talking about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. Like she really tried to bring the country together. I mean, she was reaching out to Republican voters, I think, more than she needed to. The
Hmm.
whole Liz Cheney sit down and all that stuff. But I feel like when politicians try and do that, what do they say? Good guy, nice guys finish last. It just seems like it doesn't resonate. We're in a very strange place.